All right, thank you so much for joining us today for our, I can't believe I'm saying this, final small great conversation with Brandon Griggs today. We started this session over 6 weeks ago in response to the calls of action around social justice and racism here in our community and of course nationally as well. My name is Sabine Perwez and I'm honored to serve as the producer and executive director of TEDxJacksonville. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, our organization's mission is to open minds with inspiring ideas, and we are a volunteer-led team of about 25 individuals who believe deeply in ideas worth spreading. And small great conversations really are just that. They are with previous TEDx Jacksonville speakers that spoke at our stage at different points in our organization's history. And they'll delve a little bit deeper into the conversations that they shared both at the conference and what's transpired since. Today's conversation is with our local high school student hero, Brandon Griggs, and it's moderated by Brianna Johnson, who is a TEDx Jacksonville team member. Brianna has a passion for helping and serving people. She's been involved with the non-for-profit Big Brothers and Big Sisters. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology and a minor in Mass Communications from the University of Florida. Originally from Lake City, Florida, she is quite familiar with the Panhandle area and of course, all that Jacksonville has to offer as well. And on our team, she helps with both student engagement and engagement in general.
Good afternoon. As Sabine shared, my name is Brianna Johnson, and I am the Student Engagement Coordinator with TEDx Jacksonville. I'm so excited to be here with you all today, and I have the pleasure to introduce a passionate and courageous young man, Brandon Griggs. Before I give his amazing introduction, I want to personally congratulate you and give kudos for having the courage to speak in front of hundreds of people as a junior in college. That is something that I've never done, Brandon. I can only imagine the adrenaline and nerves and butterflies you may have or had, but it is something that is truly commendable, and you have now given the ability for people to say, if Brandon can do it, I can do it. So kudos to you. And I also wanted to point out, I just heard it in your text, in your chat, in your TED Talk, but I just wanted to say that you were indeed able to achieve educational excellence with your 4.0 GPA. Now, for the introduction. Given the disproportionate representation of Black youth in our juvenile justice system, it's evident that the lack of good schools, adequate funding, and resources in minority communities are the mechanisms by which African American students are flushed down the school-to-prison pipeline. Brandon Griggs has witnessed firsthand the inequities that permeate our education system. Brandon is a senior at Robert E. Lee High School who proudly maintains a 4.0 GPA, an EVAC movement member who was committed to redefining stereotypes and setting an example for other Black teens. Juvenile justice reform, Brandon argues, begins in our kindergarten classrooms because keeping kids out of prison starts with giving them basic literacy skills. Brandon Griggs is a student activist and advocate for at-risk youth who, like him, have lived in the epicenter of gang and gun violence in Jacksonville and experienced its traumatic effects. As an advisor to Harvard's Graduate School of Education, he represents Florida's youth, bringing attention to problems that students face that aren't getting enough awareness. He was also elected to serve on the Jacksonville City Council Task Force on Safety and Crime Reduction, where he proposes further legislation on the violence that has so deeply impacted him. Brandon currently works as a national spokesperson for the Campaign for Youth Justice. And most recently, even though we're in the midst of a global pandemic, Brandon continues to advocate for youth while taking classes at Florida State College of Jacksonville, who is on track to graduate with his AA at the end of the semester. Brandon, thank you for joining us. I am so excited to moderate this discussion with you today. So let's jump right into the first question. Quite a bit has happened in the world across our nation since you spoke on the TEDx Jacksonville stage. Where have you anchored your time and focus since your talk?
Yeah, so especially considering recent events with the murder of Breonna Taylor, or if you look at the murder of George Floyd, I think it's drawn a lot of attention to race relations. and the importance of restoring a dialogue in our country about the issue of race and how it plays a factor in our society. And that's opened up a lot of paths for Hear the Youth to delve into new activism work. For example, as you mentioned, my high school's name is Robert E. Lee High School, which is the namesake of a Confederate general. In fact, the biggest Confederate general who led the Confederate Army. And that's despite the fact that our school is over 60% African American. And at first, this wasn't something that people really cared a lot about. People were kind of complacent about it because it had been that way for such a long time, and there was no real incentive to change it. But looking at the dialogue surrounding race in our country, it's now allowed us to draw attention to issues like these and subliminal instances of racism that we see every day, but don't normally pay attention to. So Hear the Youth has been focused on that. I've had lots of students sign a petition in our community to get that name changed. And as a result of our campaigning efforts, the Duval County School Board has actually agreed to change that name. And so that's something we're really proud of. And so now this year in 2021, when we graduate, we'll graduate from a school with a name that we can be proud of and that represents all the hard work that we've put in over these years. Also, during this pandemic, online learning is a big thing. And so I'm really happy that we were able to get students computers while Hear the Youth was still working in person after our meeting with the superintendent, because I know that was a big issue for me personally and lots of other students, because internet access is even more crucial now for students to succeed in school. And so now we're transitioning a lot of our activism work online, whether that may be with the officials that we meet with or just student meetings that we hold.
That is amazing. I think if we can hear anything, you have stayed busy and definitely passionate about your work here in Jacksonville, and kudos to you for, spearheading that name change and getting computers to students who really are in need. It's pretty awesome, and you should be very, very proud of yourself. And that leads us into our next question. So the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor have recently led to a lot of discussions on systemic racism, Black Lives Matter, and anti-racism. How have these events amplified the message in your talk?
Yeah, so like I said, a lot of times we see these things happening on a daily basis, but we don't pay a lot of attention to them. And really the only reason that occurrences like these, like as you said with Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, or Breonna Taylor, ever get noticed is because of the power of recording and the power that people have to actually capture these events. And so I think that it's brought a lot more attention to the prevalence of racial issues in America today. That was something that I think at the time of my talk, I wanted to raise awareness for, but since these events has certainly become a lot more prominent because of the coverage of them. And so it kind of relates to a lot of the things that I talk about in my TEDx talk, because when you look at the issues that kids like me face on a daily basis, from, racial profiling, a lot of my friends and I, we're afraid to even walk outside with like a hoodie on or with our hands in our pockets because we're African American. It relates to that because you see how this can lead to, police violence or shootings of African American teens. And so you really get to understand like the plight that so many African American teens face that before that, not many people understood very well. So I think it's brought attention to the issue, and it's also shown how much it impacts youth like myself.
Definitely. And, you brought up a good point with the importance of the recordings. Can you imagine, if we didn't have social media and so many people took the time to share those videos, comment about those videos, there's no telling if we would have even known about a lot of this stuff. So outside of just the recording, the ability to share, that outside of just being on the local news or submitting to media, really has allowed us to understand that there really is a problem, and conversations need to be had, but how do we move forward and make sure that we can end it? So that was a really good point that you brought up. According to studies by Pew Research Center, in 2018, Black Americans represented 33% of the sentenced prison population, nearly triple our 12% share of the US adult population. Surveys conducted by the Department of Justice have found that 85% of incarcerated youth can't read, and this unsettling link between illiteracy and one's likelihood of arrest is shocking. What would you say to those who believe that we have moved on as a country and think that systemic racism does not require a conversation?
I think that the important thing that you have to look at is the fact that it's systemic. And so it's because this racism is systemic and it's perpetuated in our society for so long that we don't realize that it's really a problem. And so I think that when you look at things like the school to prison pipeline, which you mentioned, and how so many youth who don't have access to a good education have to resort to crime because they can't get a degree and work a job, it's something that a lot of people don't realize is an issue. And I totally understand that. And I think that because of my TEDx talk and because of people raising awareness for these things, hopefully people start to understand where we're coming from and why a lot of times African-American youth and youth of color have to resort to those kinds of avenues and why it leads to these problems. Also, I would say really just to take the time to try to put yourself in those people's shoes and the situations and predicaments that they're in, and just to understand what it would feel like to be in a society where you might be profiled because of the color of your skin. And when you look at it from that perspective, it really changes your understanding of how that can be a really big issue for certain people. Whereas if you look at someone else, it might not be that big of an issue. So it's really a perspective-based issue that I think people have to put themselves in others' shoes to understand.
Very good point. You know, on a personal note, I had someone tell me that racism is not as bad for African Americans as we make it seem, you know, and that really kind of hit home for me because it was not coming from an African American person, you know, and I think the most important point that I heard you say for me was that you really have to put yourself in other people's shoes. You know, you may not go through the same things, you may not go through the same hardships, but that doesn't mean that it's not happening for somebody else. You know, and so being able to have empathy, you know, have compassion, listen to people when they're talking about their personal issues is important to understand that systemic racism is real. You know, it's a thing, and we all have a duty and a job really to make it go away. But a lot of time it takes the willingness to hear others. And so I completely agree. You do have to put yourself in other people's shoes to know exactly what they could be going through. In your introduction, I shared that you often argue that juvenile justice reform begins in our kindergarten classrooms due to the direct correlation of having basic literacy skills. In addition to starting fundamental literacy skills at a lower grade level, what do you believe can end the school to prison pipeline today?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I say literacy is so important is because it shows how a lot of times the problem starts before we actually put any effort into solving it. For example, if you look at funding for issues as far as juvenile justice goes, it's all towards the later part of the cycle when kids are already in prison and when they're already committing crimes. And so that's where we focus a lot of our efforts on helping students, when in reality, we should focus it before the problem ever arises. And we should focus it on getting kids to where they have a stable education, where they're doing well in their school and they don't feel the need to resort to crime in the first place. And I think that that was really important for me, not just because of the statistics that show that, but my personal experience as a young person who, was really desperate and who, without things like internet access and, electricity and just basic essentials at home, couldn't do well in school and felt really hopeless. And I really had nowhere to turn to. And so for a lot of kids in those situations, that leads to crime, that leads to joining gangs, that leads to violence. And so if we invest in those kids who are at that stage of the problem early on, then we can prevent it from ever happening.
Very good point. You know, there is a direct correlation with poverty to crime. And a lot of times with poverty, people do not have access to internet, don't have access to those resources really to make them get ahead. And you mentioned in your talk that if you think that a child has 24 hours truly in a day, you are sadly mistaken, because it's not the same for everybody. You know, there oftentimes you'll have 12-year-olds having to act as an adult to look out for their younger siblings, and it's not fair, but it is reality. And so what can we do to help our poverty rate? What resources can we give to families to make sure that they have the needs to get those fundamentals down so that you are setting yourself up for success in the future? So awesome points as usual. As a senior at Robert E. Lee High School and the recent decision to change the name of the school, how have students been a part of that conversation?
Yeah, so the school board just recently made the decision to start the change to our school's name, but students were very involved in the effort to get that petition signed, and I'm pretty sure over like 50% of the signatures that even went on that petition in the first place were from students who actually attend that school. And that's really important because it shows how youth have the power to make a difference. And, you know, when we use our voices and when we express our opinions, we can make a big change. And that's been evidenced by the work that Here the Youth has done. It's been evidenced by the fact that the school board has decided to even change that name, which has been so huge for us. And in the future, youth will be included on what that name will be and how we're going to change it. And so it just shows the power that youth have to make a difference. And I believe it's really important.
Absolutely. So as a student at Robert E. Lee High School, do you have like a top contender of what you would like to see the name be?
Not at this point, because it's a little too preemptive to say. But hopefully we'll have a list, I believe, is what's going to happen to choose from. And if students do have like different names that they want, I think that we'll be allowed to submit some too. So I can't wait to be a part of that process, and I think it'll be pretty exciting.
Okay, so you won't be proposing Brandon Griggs High School?
No, probably not.
Hey, it's okay. You were introduced to TEDxJacksonville through the EVAC movement. Tell us more about the program and where it is now.
Right, yeah. So when people ask about the EVAC movement, I usually start with the name. And EVAC is basically cave backwards. And it's a reference to one of the first lessons that students in EVAC ever had, which was about Plato's allegory in the cave. And it's kind of used as a metaphor for students living in crime-ridden neighborhoods like our own, because they're essentially in a cave of crime and violence. And in Plato's allegory of the cave, there are people in this cave who only see shadows because they're facing the inside of the cave. And so that's their perspective on what reality is. But someone comes and liberates them and shows them the sunlight and shows them all of the world that's out there. And so it helps them to change their perspective and change how they view the world. And the same is true for teens of color living in these kinds of communities. And that's what the goal of EVAC is to do, is to show them what's out there, to give them a perspective of what they're capable of, and that they don't have to follow in the footsteps of people who go down the path of drug dealing or getting involved in crime and violence. And so it's helped a lot of youth at my school, including myself, to improve and do well academically and strive to succeed, because we can and we have the potential to. And so we just need to widen our perspective of what we're capable of.
That is awesome. I love how much meaning the name has. I believe I saw a picture that your group was with President Barack Obama a couple years. Were you a part of that experience?
No, I personally wasn't, but it was a really awesome event. And it was at the University of North Florida when Barack Obama came. And so we got the chance to meet him. And so I got to say hi, even though I didn't get to be in the actual picture. But it was really cool to get to meet such an important person, and to show that like our efforts were being recognized. And even aside from meeting the president, we've done lots of really cool stuff. Myself and another EVAC student have served on Harvard's Youth Advisory Board. We've flown to Washington, D.C. to meet with the Senate and lots of leaders in Congress. And we've just done so much more than anybody ever thought was possible.
Yeah, that is so amazing. What are your priorities for this current school year?
Probably just finishing my classes and applying for college, which is a really interesting process for me because I'm like the first in my family who will probably go. And so just, doing that is really fulfilling, and I'm glad that I'm able to make my parents proud and make my mom proud, really, that I'll be going to college and getting an education. So that's my biggest priority, is just finishing up that and seeing how that turns out.
That is so amazing. Do you have a specific college in mind that you would like to attend? Is it Harvard?
Maybe I'll definitely apply, but also I'm interested in colleges in Florida because I have a bright future, so that'll cover tuition for me. So yeah, definitely I'm deciding, but I will apply and see what happens.
Awesome. As a shameless plug, I went to the University of Florida, so go Gators, just to throw that out there. As we can hear and see, Brandon, you are meant to change the world. What is next for you in your work that will lead to a more just society?
hmm I'd like to continue the work that I do and hear the youth, even as I continue through college, and also just kind of pass the torch to other students who want to get involved in activism work and aren't really sure how to do that. And so I'd like for it to continue to be a youth-led organization and get more students involved and have more students realize the power that their voices have just by continuing to meet with officials and sharing kids' opinions because they can be really powerful and the ability of a story to make a difference and telling something personal is really powerful. And so we want more kids to get involved in that in the future, hopefully.
That is so great. Can you tell us a bit more about Here to You?
Yes. So Here the Youth was the organization that myself and my friends started to really amplify the voices of teens in our community. And so it was through that that we were able to meet Duval County Superintendent Dr. Green to get kids computers countywide. And we've also done lots of more cool stuff. We've met with Chartwells about the issue of school lunches and how hunger can impact the ability of kids to do well in schools. We've met with lots of local legislators and city council people. And that's what actually led to two of our members serving on the task force for the city of Jacksonville on crime and safety. And so it's really cool to be like the only kids there, and it's very interesting. So yeah, Here the Youth has been able to make a big difference in I think a lot of kids' lives, and hopefully we can get more people to be a part of that and make a difference in our community.
Awesome. One thing I wanted to share was like Sabine said earlier, I'm from Lake City, and it is incredible to me to see how many high school students and young adults have stepped up in these very trying times. I recently learned that there was a Black Lives Matter led protest in my hometown, and it was coordinated, permits were pulled, all by high school students. And I reflect back, like, when I was in high school, would I have done something like that? Like I didn't, have situations like Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor or George Floyd that I can remember that really created this opportunity to just kind of step up and speak out. And I just really don't know if I would have had the courage to do it then. And so it truly is so commendable to me that the younger generation is speaking up, stepping up more than I've ever seen. Often people will say the younger generation is going to change the world. And what I mean by younger generation is high school students, young adult, college age students, that they are going to change the world. And I truly believe it because I have never seen nor heard so many people speak up and speak out. And it's awesome to see. So kudos to you. You are leading the fight. You are a great inspiration to a lot of people, and so keep up the good work. As a reminder, please share your questions in the question and answer box. I have already received a ton of questions for Brandon, and so I will do my best to share those with him so he can answer them all. But to end, many of us are inspired by you today. However, sometimes roadblocks appear that stop many from keeping on the good fight, or like the late John Lewis said, get in good trouble. What keeps you going, and are you hopeful?
Yeah, so I think what keeps me going is the people who, first believed in me and first got me on this path. And so I'd like to thank, my teachers, Miss Martini, Miss Donna Frio, and my parents, just for, helping me to change and helping me to kind of reform myself in a way to where I'm even at this point right now, which I never thought would have been possible. And so having someone that really believes in you is very important, I think, to continue, succeeding and to continue striving to do well and make a difference. And I think that's something that a lot of kids don't really have in these communities and in these schools. And so for me, it was a teacher. And for someone else, it might be a mentor or a coach. And so I think it's really important that teachers invest in kids and really believe in them and the potential that they have to make a difference. And that's really what keeps me going.
Yeah, that is so true. A big thank you to Miss Martini for being your mentor and role model. I know working with big brothers, big sisters firsthand on how important mentors can be. I believe studies show that 1 of 3 kids will not grow up with a mentor. And so having that person that's in your corner, that ally, that role model really does inspire, youth, even adults to keep going. Like I said earlier, we're going to run into roadblocks. There will be barriers because being great is not easy. Wanting to change the world is not easy. And so having those people that keep you going is important. So a huge thank you to Miss Martini, Ms. Donna Frio, and your amazing mom. I know she is the foundation of that. So thank you so much. That concludes my questions. We have a ton of questions from the audience that I'm going to share with you. Thank you, Brandon. You were absolutely amazing today. And let's get started with those audience questions. So, Brandon, what comes next for you? We'll love to know your aspirations and if we can help.
Yeah. So in the future, a lot of people tell me that I should pursue like something in like the humanities or maybe like law to continue my activism work. And while I'm definitely going to continue doing the stuff that I do as a part of Hear the Youth, I'm really interested in science personally. And so in the future, I'd like to be a doctor. I'm not sure exactly what kind, but I'm definitely interested in science. And that's actually because of someone who I met through my TEDx talk. Her name is Joy Wolfram. And so I was able to work in her lab over the summer. And that experience was really cool. And I enjoyed it a whole lot. And so it's really made me a lot more passionate about science. And so I'd like to do that as a career.
Science was not for me. You get all the credit for science. I was personally a math person. So do you have a specialty that you would want?
Yeah, I'm definitely doing like a lot of chemistry right now. So it's made me a lot more interested in it as a subject. The funny thing is that at first I kind of hated it, but I've learned to love it as a result of like doing it and seeing how it can be applied in labs and like the many real world applications that it has. So it's very cool because it kind of explains the world, and that's very interesting to me.
Hey, you are a superstar. Keep going, Brandon. The next question would be, who are your current role models?
Yeah, so I have a lot of role models. Like I said, Miss Martini and like a lot of my teachers who have believed in me and helped me along the way. I'm also a part of the 5,000 Role Models program at my school. So not only am I able to have mentorship from other African-American leaders, because that's the goal of the program, to give Black students mentorship, but I'm also able to be a mentor for other kids in middle school and ninth graders at my high school, whether that may be through the field trips that we go on or the events that we hold, like the tie tying ceremony, which is really important for like showing kids like that they can have confidence and how to dress for an interview, how to talk appropriately for like important things that you'll have come up in life. And so being in that program was really important as far as mentorship goes, and also all of the people who supported me along the way.
That is awesome. Your next question would be, youth engagement is exciting to see. What are the main reasons your peers say they don't engage in the community?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is that they feel like they can't make a difference. And this is one that really hurts me to hear. Like a lot of people, they say, I'm not gonna vote when I turn 18 because, my vote doesn't really matter. It doesn't make a difference. And like, I'm just one person, so I can't, and I'm not capable of, doing all this great stuff that, people say is possible through getting involved in my community. And I say that like, that's totally not true. And that's one of the things that I try to do for youth in my community, is be an example for the fact that it doesn't matter what your circumstances are or what you're faced with. You can still be great, and you can still make a difference in your community no matter who you are. And also, as far as voting goes, I say to a lot of people, Florida is a swing state. So your vote does make a big difference. And if you look at like past like situations like Bush versus Gore, where, only a few votes decided the election, you really can make a difference by, being active civically and also in your community. And so that's what I try to be an example of for kids in my community.
That is so true. It's so interesting that you brought up Bush and Gore. May I ask how old you were at that time?
I wasn't even alive, I don't think.
You've done your studies. That's awesome. I agree. Voting is so important. I know sometimes, we can look at the media and just see dysfunction sometimes, but we can't be discouraged that we really do have a voice. Our founding fathers, activists for us, gave us the right to vote. They constantly shared with us how important it is to vote. So just to piggyback off of you, if you are feeling down about voting, your voice really does matter. Your vote matters. And so I encourage everyone, if you are 18 and older, please register. I think it may be too late in Florida, but if you are registered, please vote. All votes do matter. Let's see. So what response are you hearing or seeing from the white students at Lee High School regarding racism and the name change?
Yeah, so the really cool thing is that we've been able to get support from not just, African American students at our school who, may see these problems and are directly impacted by them, but also white students and other students getting involved in Hear the Youth. And despite not being personally faced with these problems, they're still very passionate about them. And it shows how no matter who you are, you can get involved in activism work. And I think it's very fulfilling because it's allowed students, no matter who they are, to get involved in activism and feel like they can make a difference in their community. And so it's been awesome to see students from all backgrounds come together and support the work that we do. And I'm really proud of it.
As you should be. It kind of ties into your earlier point of you have to put, yourself in someone else's shoes sometimes, and it may not affect them or make them feel some type of way, but the fact that they are listening to you all and to hear that it does make you uncomfortable and they are willing to change that and help you is very powerful. So that's amazing that your student body is really kind of backing you all in that. Brandon, you are such an amazing young man. What advice would you give to the young student who is struggling and doesn't think they are meant to succeed? Where did you get the strength to push and finish the project at Best Buy?
Yeah, so I would say to them, that sounds a lot like me when I was young and when I was in ninth grade first starting out. And I think that, like I said, having someone who believes in me was really important, but also my own motivation and, believing in myself and that I could get this done. And so I was just extremely determined to finish this project. And it was really crazy that I went to that length just to get it done. And I'd say to them and to other young students who are looking to, achieve and do well academically, that you just have to work really hard and you have to be able to go to those extreme lengths, no matter what, to try and maintain academic excellence. And it's definitely worth it in the end, because as you can see from the statistics in my TED Talk, just literacy and how you do in school can have such a big impact on your future. And so I'd advise kids to take it very seriously because it matters a lot and you won't regret it.
That is so great. So great. What would you recommend to keep junior high school students focused on academic excellence?
Yeah, so especially during this pandemic, I know it's really hard to go to school and attend class. And I've even found that happening in myself where it's very difficult to maintain focus, especially when school goes online. And I think that one of the biggest things for staying grounded, at least for me, is remembering the importance of just having a clear workspace and having a time set where you can just focus on schoolwork. And I know that's not possible for a lot of people sometimes because of circumstances that they may be growing through. And so for me, when I had problems like that, I would just work with my teachers and they were very supportive of me through all the stuff that I've been going through. And so I think just sharing that issue and sharing the issues that you're having, learning online is really important. And I always opened up to people about that kind of stuff. And so it helped me because I found that a lot of other peers of mine were facing those issues when it came to learning on the internet. And so it made me feel like I wasn't alone really in those feelings. So definitely don't feel like it's not normal because a lot of kids feel that way. But also just, try reaching out to other students and other teachers and adults for help. and don't be afraid to ask. So yeah.
That is, don't be afraid to ask. I think that is a life lesson that many adults can be remembered, especially myself, but it is never, you should never be afraid to ask. So I actually see a high school principal attending this live talk. What would you say to principals, teachers to make students feel the most supported and heard?
Yeah. So I would just say be willing to hear out like students' ideas. I know when I first came to my principal about Hear the Youth, he was extremely supportive of it. Even though like a lot of the stuff we were trying to do was really crazy and like groundbreaking sounding at the time. And so just letting young people engage in activism and really entertaining like their efforts to first get involved in their communities is really important, because it can plant those first seeds for getting involved. And so after my first talk with like community leaders, that's what led me to continue doing the work that I do in Hear the Youth. And so because my school administrators and my principal believed in the work that we did, it's why we continue to do it. And so just planting that first seed in kids and believing in them and allowing them to get involved is really important. So I think just listening and also empowering them is key for a lot of school administrators.
So good. So good. How are you and your family processing racism and practicing self-care?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, it's been like a little weird, especially with all of the like mandates to like stay inside and get masks and stuff. But we've just been working to like maintain that and stay socially distanced and like stay in quarantine and stuff. And like it's really hard because like a lot of times you want to go outside and like you want to like go shopping or meet up with friends, but you just have to like follow the protocol. And I think that if we just work together in this time and exercise like a lot of the same principles of like working together as a community and helping each other, we can get this done with. And by the time that this pandemic is over, we'll be able to do all of those things again. And so that's something that I'm looking forward to in the future, at least.
That's great. Have any of your hobbies had to come to a standstill because of the pandemic?
Yeah, definitely a lot of like physical activities like sports and stuff have had to like come to a halt. So I haven't been able to play basketball with my friends anymore, which kind of sucks, but hopefully that'll happen again in the future. But I just kind of understand the importance that social distancing has, and it's just important to work with everyone because we're all together in this really at this time.
So true. So true. What would you say to those organizations that don't have youth voices around the table? Why is it necessary to have youth representation to solve problems?
I think it's important because oftentimes it provides perspective to a lot of the problems that organizations talk about. For example, if you look at schools or school boards, you have adults talking about issues that pertain primarily to teens that are in their school systems. And so by having a young person there, it kind of provides a sense of accountability and also an inside voice really as to how these policies and how these things that they're legislating impacts the young people who see this stuff every day. And so I think that young people kind of have a right really to be involved in that discussion because these things so directly impact them. And so some advice that I would give for involving young people in this kind of stuff is really just hearing them out. And oftentimes young people will come to make their voices heard, whether that may be through public comment, which is something I've seen a lot at like these meetings, and also just even participating in these boards, which I've happeningly been able to do. And so I think other youth can do that as well, is just be an active part of the discussion. And so it's not something that's impossible, having a teen on like, a board or, a commission. And it's really powerful to have their voice there.
In your perfect world, would there be a teen on the school board?
Yeah, definitely. That'd be pretty cool. And I know some school boards in Florida already have that. They have like a youth representative. And I know some kids who have done that. And it's really cool to see how that impacts a lot of the stuff that they do on a daily basis. So it's not impossible. But yeah, I definitely like to see that.
hey, if you start the movement, you will get a signature from me. So you got one at least. So that wraps up all of our questions. I think what I got out of today, and I hope others did, is that nothing is impossible. You know, you shared with us that you walked to Best Buy at night in the rain to finish a PowerPoint. You know, and I do not know how many people would actually do that, you know, have the perseverance and the determination to get something like that done through the circumstances. And so I hope that if there are any youth, really adults that are watching today, that you all are inspired, that you can do it. You know, no voice is too silent. Everyone has the ability to step up and make a difference. Everyone will just do it in their own way. But we all have the ability to truly change the world, just like you are doing, Brandon. And so a huge kudos goes to you for all the work that you are doing and will continue to do. Do you have any last thoughts that you would like to leave with our Zoom and Facebook audience today?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming and, you know, hearing what I have to say. I really appreciate it. And I enjoyed being able to come back and, you know, share where I'm at right now, really, with my activism journey and the work that I do. And I really appreciate all the support.